The freezing wind whipped through the dark Chicago alley, biting into Nkiru's face like tiny blades of glass. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like heavy blocks of lead as she slipped on the dirty ice, crashing hard to her knees. She tasted blood and dirty snow. Behind her, the heavy crunch of boots was getting closer. "Come on, Nkiru. Don't make this harder than it has to be," a deep voice echoed off the brick walls. It was Officer Miller, the same cop who had handed her a cup of hot coffee just an hour ago at the station. The same cop who told her she was safe now that she had identified the men who shot up the diner. She was a fool. She should have known the police in this city were bought and paid for. The moment she signed that witness statement, she signed her own death warrant. Miller and his partner had driven her out to this abandoned industrial zone, unlocked the back doors of the cruiser, and told her to run. A sick game of cat and mouse. "I see her," the second cop yelled. The beam of a flashlight cut through the falling snow, landing right on Nkiru's face. She scrambled backward, pressing her back against a frozen dumpster. She was trapped. There was a tall chain-link fence blocking the end of the alley. She patted her coat pockets, her hands shaking so bad she could barely feel her own fingers. Nothing. She didn't even have a damn phone. Miller stepped into the light. He pulled his gun from his holster and smiled. "It's a shame. You should have minded your own business, little girl. Now, close your eyes." Nkiru squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She braced for the loud bang. But it never came. Instead, she heard a sickening crunch of bone, followed by a wet, choking sound. Nkiru opened her eyes. Officer Miller was on his knees. Standing behind him was a man she had never seen before. He had one arm wrapped tightly around Miller's neck, pulling his head back at a painful angle. The stranger was older, maybe in his early 50s. He had sharp, hard features and dark eyes that looked completely dead. Silver hair touched the sides of his head, blending into the collar of his expensive black wool coat. With one quick, brutal twist, the older man snapped the dirty cop's neck. Miller dropped to the snow like a sack of rocks. The second cop yelled and raised his gun, but the older man was too fast. He pulled a heavy pistol from his coat, didn't even aim, and fired twice. The loud shots rang through the alley. The second cop grabbed his chest and fell backward into the trash, dead before he even stopped moving. Nkiru screamed and pushed herself up. She didn't know who this crazy old man was, but she wasn't waiting to find out. She turned and ran for the fence, desperate to climb over. She only made it 2 steps. A massive hand grabbed the back of her coat, pulling her backward with terrifying strength. She hit a solid, hard chest. The man smelled like expensive smoke and cold winter air. He wrapped a thick arm around her waist, pinning her arms to her sides so she couldn't fight. "Stop moving," his voice rumbled right next to her ear. It was deep, rough, and had a thick Korean accent. "Unless you want me to leave you here with them." Before we see what this dangerous older man does with Nkiru, please take a second to leave a like on this video. It really helps the algorithm push more gritty stories like this to you. Also, let us know in the comments down below, where are you watching from tonight? Or drop a rating from 1 to 10 for the story so far. Listen, if you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you might leave Nkiru to die alone in this freezing snow with a cold-blooded killer. Don't be the reason she loses her only chance at survival. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let's get back to the story. Nkiru thrashed wildly against his grip. She kicked her boots backward, trying to hit his shins, but hitting him felt like kicking a solid brick wall. He didn't even flinch. "Let me go, fuck you, let me go," she screamed, twisting her head to try and bite his arm. The man clicked his tongue, a short sound of annoyance. He spun her around and shoved her hard against the brick wall. The impact knocked the wind right out of her. Before she could slide down, he pressed his forearm against her upper chest, holding her in place. Not hard enough to choke her, but heavy enough to let her know she couldn't move an inch. She stared up at him, her chest heaving. Up close, he was terrifying. There were deep lines around his mouth and eyes, showing his age, but his body was massive. He didn't have the soft body of a regular older man. He was built like a tank, radiating a quiet, deadly heat in the freezing air. "Are you done acting like a child?" he asked quietly. "Who the hell are you?" Nkiru spat, her voice shaking. "You just killed 2 cops." "Dirty cops," he corrected her smoothly. His dark eyes scanned her face, taking in her messy hair, her scraped cheek, and her shivering frame. They were going to put a bullet in your head because you saw too much at the diner tonight. You are very lucky I found you first. Nkiru swallowed hard. You were following me. I was watching the police station, he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He wiped a few drops of Miller's blood off his hands, his face completely bored. When I saw those men put you in the back of an unmarked car instead of a transport van, I knew what they were doing. So you saved me, Nkiru said, her mind spinning. She didn't trust him. Nobody in this city did anything for free. Why? He tossed the dirty handkerchief onto Miller's dead body. He looked back at Nkiru, and the coldness in his eyes made her stomach drop. Because the man they shot in that diner was my younger brother, and you are the only person who saw the faces of the shooters. You are going to help me find them. Hell no, Nkiru said quickly, shaking her head. I'm not doing shit. I just want to go home. I'll disappear. I won't say a word to anyone. The man leaned in closer. His face was only inches from hers. You can't go home. The people who bought those cops already know your name. They know where you live. If I let you walk out of this alley, you will be dead before the sun comes up. Your only choice is to come with me. You're crazy, she breathed. I am Ryu Seong-min, he said, and right now I am the only thing keeping you breathing. Now walk, my car is at the end of the block. He stepped back and dropped his arm. Nkiru rubbed her chest, eyeing the dead bodies on the ground. She wanted to run. Every survival instinct she had was screaming at her to run into the dark. But where would she go? She had $20 in her pocket. Her apartment was probably already full of guys with guns waiting for her. The cops wanted her dead. She looked at Ryu. He was already walking away, not even looking back to see if she was following. He was so sure of himself, so arrogant. Damn it, she muttered under her breath. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself and ran to catch up with him. His car was a heavy, black SUV with tinted windows. It looked like a government vehicle. Ryu unlocked the doors, and Nkiru climbed into the passenger seat. As soon as he started the engine, hot air blasted through the vents. Nkiru let out a shaky breath and held her freezing hands up to the heat. Ryu pulled out onto the icy street, driving smoothly into the night. He didn't turn on the radio. The silence in the car was heavy and suffocating. Nkiru looked at him out of the corner of her eye. His hands on the steering wheel were thick, scarred, and strong. He wore an expensive silver watch. Everything about him screamed old money and deep violence. So, what is the plan? She asked, breaking the silence. Her voice sounded too loud in the quiet car. You want me to point out the shooters on the street? I don't know who they are. I just saw their faces for 2 seconds. That is enough, Ryu said, his eyes fixed on the snowy road. They know you saw them. They know the police failed to kill you tonight. They will come looking for you. Nkiru froze. The hot air from the vents suddenly felt cold. What are you talking about? I left those 2 dead cops in the alley for a reason, Ryu said calmly. When their boss finds them, he will know someone took you. He will turn the city upside down to find you, to finish the job. Nkiru turned her whole body to face him. Are you out of your damn mind? You're using me as bait. Yes, he said simply. Stop the car, Nkiru yelled, grabbing the door handle. She pulled it, but it was locked. Unlock this fucking door right now. I'm not a worm on a hook for your crazy revenge mission. I didn't ask for any of this. Ryu didn't even look at her. He just kept driving. If you jump out of this car, you die. If you go to the police, you die. If you run away, they will find you and you die. With me, you have a chance. You're going to get me killed, she screamed, hitting the dashboard with her fist. Ryu suddenly slammed on the brakes. The heavy SUV slid slightly on the ice before coming to a hard stop in the middle of a dark, empty street. Nkiru jerked forward against her seatbelt. Ryu turned to her. His face was a mask of dark, scary anger. My brother is lying on a cold steel table in the morgue with half his face blown off. He was a good man. The men who did that will pay. I will tear their world apart piece by piece. And you are the key to drawing them out. So you will sit there, you will keep your mouth shut, and you will do exactly what I tell you. Nkiru stared at him, her chest rising and falling fast. He wasn't asking her. He was owning her. The realization hit her hard. She had traded one group of killers for an older, meaner one. You're a monster, she whispered. I am retired, he said, turning back to the wheel and stepping on the gas. But for them, I will gladly be a monster again. They drove for another 30 minutes, leaving the city lights behind. They entered a wealthy, private area near the lake. The houses were huge and hidden behind tall gates and trees. Ryu pulled up to a massive black iron gate in front of a modern, concrete and glass house. It looked like a fortress. The gate opened silently, and he drove down a long driveway, parking in an underground garage that held 3 other expensive black cars. Get out, he ordered, turning off the engine. Nkiru got out slowly. Her legs still felt weak. Ryu grabbed her by the arm, his grip tight but not bruising, and pulled her toward an elevator. They rode up in silence. When the doors opened, Nkiru stepped into a huge, beautiful living room. The floors were dark wood. One entire wall was made of glass, looking out over the dark, freezing water of the lake. The furniture was black leather and dark metal. It looked rich, cold, and lonely. Ryu walked over to a wet bar, poured himself a glass of brown liquor, and drank it in one swallow. He set the glass down with a heavy clack. My men are surrounding the property, Ryu said, taking off his heavy coat and throwing it over a chair. Underneath, he wore a dark gray sweater that hugged his broad shoulders. Nobody comes in without my permission. Nobody leaves. Nkiru wrapped her arms around herself. The house was warm, but she still felt cold inside. Where am I supposed to sleep? She asked, her voice tired and defeated. Ryu looked at her. His dark eyes slowly moved down her body and back up to her face. It wasn't a look of romance. It was a look of possession. With me, he said flatly. Nkiru's eyes went wide, her jaw dropped. Excuse me, the hell I am. You will sleep in my bed, Ryu repeated, walking slowly toward her. His heavy footsteps echoed on the wood floor. The men we are dealing with are snakes. They have money, they have power, and they can get to anyone. I do not trust you out of my sight, not for a single second. Nkiru took a step back, her heart racing again. I'll sleep on the damn couch. You can watch me from the stairs. I'm not getting in a bed with you. Look at you. You're too damn old for me to be playing these games. Ryu stopped right in front of her. He looked down at her, a muscle jumping in his square jaw. Her insult about his age didn't seem to hurt his feelings, it only made him look more annoyed. This is not a game, he said, his voice dropping to a low, rough growl. And this is not a date. I do not care what you want. I do not care if you like it. While you are in my house, you belong to me. You breathe when I say so. You sleep where I put you. If I wake up in the middle of the night and you are not right next to me where I can see you, I will tie you to the bedpost. Do you understand me? Nkiru glared up at him, tears of anger burning in her eyes. She wanted to slap his harsh, handsome face. She wanted to run. But the heavy reality of her situation crushed her down. She was trapped in a fortress with a dangerous older man who didn't care about her at all. I hate you, she hissed. Ryu just stared at her, his expression hard as stone. Good, hate keeps you alert. Now take your boots off. You are tracking snow on my floor. Nkiru kicked her wet, freezing boots off her feet. One of them hit the bottom of the expensive wooden stairs with a loud thud. Ryu didn't even blink. He just turned around and started walking up the steps, expecting her to follow him like a lost dog. Nkiru crossed her arms over her chest, hugging herself tightly. She hated this. She hated him. She hated the dirty cops who put her in this mess, and she hated the gang members who shot up the diner. But standing down here alone in the massive, dark living room felt worse than following the scary older man upstairs. She walked up the steps slowly. Her socks slipped a little on the polished wood. The second floor was just as huge and cold as the first. Ryu walked straight into the master bedroom. It was a giant room with a wall of glass that looked out over the freezing, black waters of Lake Michigan. The wind was howling outside, throwing hard snow against the thick glass, but inside it was dead quiet. In the middle of the room was a massive king-sized bed with dark gray sheets. Ryu stood next to the bed and pulled his gray sweater over his head. He threw it on a leather chair in the corner. Nkiru froze in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. His back was covered in thick, ugly scars. Some looked like knife wounds, long and jagged. Others looked like old burn marks. He was heavily muscled, his skin pulled tight over his broad shoulders and thick chest. For an older man, he looked like a brick wall that had survived a war. He unbuckled his heavy black belt and pulled his gun from the holster at his waist. The loud clack of the metal hitting the dark wood of the nightstand made Nkiru jump. "Are you going to stand in the doorway all night?" Ryu asked. He didn't turn around. He just unbuttoned the cuffs of the dark shirt he wore under the sweater. "Because I will shut the door in your face and lock you out in the hall, and the floors out there are very cold." "I told you I'm not sleeping in that bed," Nkiru said, holding her ground. Her voice shook a little, but she tried to sound tough. "I don't know you. You're a killer. You think I'm just going to climb under the covers with you? You're out of your damn mind." Ryu finally turned around. His dark eyes locked onto hers. He looked exhausted, but his body was completely tense, like a trap ready to snap closed. "Do you think the men who shot up that diner care if you're comfortable? Do you think the cops who drove you out to that alley cared if you were scared? You are acting like a spoiled child. I do not want to sleep with you. I want to keep you alive so I can use you to catch the men who murdered my brother. If you sleep in the hall, you might try to run. If you run, you die. Now get in the damn bed." Nkiru's face burned with anger. "Fuck you." "Get in the bed," he repeated, his voice dropping lower. It sounded like a threat. Nkiru walked over to the edge of the mattress. She kept her dirty jeans and her thick wool sweater on. She didn't even take off her damp socks. She climbed onto the mattress, staying on top of the dark gray blanket. She moved as far to the left edge as she possibly could, pressing her back toward him. She hugged her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. Ryu sighed heavily. It was a harsh, tired sound. He turned off the main bedroom light, leaving only the weak glow of the security lights shining in from the yard below. He climbed into the right side of the bed. The mattress dipped under his heavy weight. He didn't pull the covers up either. He just lay flat on his back, his hands resting on his stomach. "If you fall off the edge of the bed, I am going to tie your wrist to the bedpost," Ryu said to the dark ceiling. "I'm fine right here," Nkiru snapped, her teeth chattering lightly from the cold air near the glass window. Suddenly, a massive, heavy hand grabbed her by the hip. Nkiru let out a short scream as Ryu pulled her backward with one rough pull. She slid across the smooth gray sheets until her back hit his hard, warm side. He wrapped his thick arm around her waist, trapping her against him. His body was like a furnace, radiating a crazy amount of heat. "Let go of me," she yelled, trying to peel his heavy arm off her stomach. It was like trying to move a fallen tree. "Stop fighting," he growled right in her ear. His breath tickled the side of her neck. "It is freezing near the glass. You are shivering. I cannot listen to your teeth chattering all night. Go to sleep." "You're a sick old bastard," she hissed, still pulling at his thick fingers. Ryu tightened his grip just a little bit, squeezing her stomach. "If you do not stop moving, I will put you in the basement. It has no windows and it locks from the outside. Make your choice." Nkiru stopped pulling. Her hands dropped to the bed. She hated him. She hated how easily he controlled her. But her body was completely exhausted. The crazy events of the night, the diner shooting, the cops, the freezing alley, suddenly caught up to her all at once. The heat coming off Ryu's body felt too good against the chill in her bones. She closed her eyes, hot tears slipping down her cheeks into the dark pillow. She didn't want to sleep next to a killer. She didn't want to be live bait. But the steady, slow beating of his heart against her back eventually pulled her down into a dark, heavy sleep. When Nkiru opened her eyes again, bright, blinding winter sunlight was pouring through the huge glass windows. She blinked, her head pounding with a dull ache. She was alone in the bed. The spot next to her was empty, but the sheets were messy. She sat up quickly, her heart skipping a beat. The house was completely silent. She swung her legs off the bed and stood up. Her damp clothes from yesterday felt gross and sticky against her skin. She walked slowly toward the master bathroom. It was huge, covered in black marble and glass. She walked in and looked around, opening the heavy wooden drawers under the sink. She needed a weapon. She couldn't just sit here waiting for this crazy old enforcer to throw her to the wolves. She pushed aside thick white towels and expensive soaps. Nothing sharp, no scissors, no razors. Ryu was smart. But in the bottom drawer, she found a heavy glass bottle of thick men's cologne. It was shaped like a square block and felt like a solid brick in her hand. It wasn't a knife, but if she hit him in the back of the head hard enough, it might knock him out. Just long enough for her to grab his keys and run. Nkiru slipped the heavy glass bottle into the deep pocket of her wool sweater. Her hand shook as she walked out of the bathroom and headed for the stairs. She crept down the wooden steps, trying to be perfectly quiet. The smell of strong black coffee and frying bacon filled the air. When she reached the bottom, she saw the kitchen. It was an open space with black granite counters and stainless steel appliances. Ryu was standing at the stove, cooking. He wore dark jeans and a black t-shirt that stretched tight across his broad back. His silver hair was brushed back neatly. He didn't look like a guy making breakfast. He looked like a soldier, preparing fuel for a war. "Put the glass bottle on the counter," Ryu said. He didn't turn around. He kept flipping the bacon with a metal fork. Nkiru froze, her blood ran cold. How the hell did he know? "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice cracking slightly. Ryu turned off the stove. He turned around slowly and leaned against the counter. His dark eyes bored into her, completely empty of any emotion. "I counted everything in that bathroom before you woke up. The Tom Ford cologne is missing. You put it in your right pocket. I can see the weight of it pulling your sweater down. Put it on the counter." Nkiru gritted her teeth. She pulled the heavy glass bottle out of her pocket and slammed it down on the granite island. It made a loud, sharp clack. "Fuck you," she spat. Ryu didn't look angry, he just looked bored. "If you try to hit me with that, I will break your wrist. Do you understand?" "You can't keep me here," she yelled, crossing her arms. "I'll scream, I'll break a window, I'll do whatever it takes to get the cops here." "The cops want you dead," Ryu reminded her simply. He grabbed 2 white plates and scooped eggs and bacon onto them. He set one plate on the island in front of one of the tall metal stools. He set his own plate next to it. "Sit down and eat. You need energy. Today, we are going to work." Nkiru's stomach growled loudly at the smell of the hot food. She was starving. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. She hated giving in, but she walked over to the stool and sat down. She picked up a silver fork and started eating the eggs fast. Ryu stood next to her, drinking black coffee from a thick mug. He didn't eat his food. He just watched her. "Slow down," he said. "You will make yourself sick." Nkiru ignored him and took a huge bite of bacon. "I just wanted some damn cherry pie," she mumbled with a full mouth. "That's all I wanted. I went into that diner to get a slice of pie after my shift at the hospital. I didn't ask to see your brother get his brains blown out." Ryu's hand tightened around his coffee mug. His knuckles went completely white. For a split second, Nkiru saw the terrible, violent monster hiding just under his calm skin. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt too tight to breathe. "Tell me what happened," Ryu said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Start from the moment you walked in." Nkiru swallowed hard, pushing her plate away. She didn't want to remember it. "I told the dirty cops already." "Tell me," Ryu commanded. He slammed his mug down on the counter. The loud crash made Nkiru flinch hard. "Okay, damn," she yelled back. She took a shaky breath, looking down at her hands. "I walked in, the bell on the door rang. The place was empty except for a guy sitting in the back booth. Your brother, I guess. He was eating a burger. He looked nervous. He kept looking at the window." Ryu nodded slowly. He knew they were coming. "I sat at the counter," Nkiru continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The waitress went to the back to get my pie. Then the front door busted open. 2 guys walked in. They were moving fast. They didn't even say anything. They just pulled out their guns and started shooting at the back booth." Nkiru closed her eyes, seeing the bright flashes of the guns in her mind, hearing the deafening bangs. "Your brother tried to stand up, but they hit him in the chest. He fell onto the table. Then one of the guys walked right up to him and shot him in the head." Ryu didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at the wall behind her. "Did they see you?" "I hid under the counter," Nkiru said, wiping a tear that escaped her eye. "But I dropped my purse. When the shooter turned around to leave, he looked right at me. We made eye contact for a solid 3 seconds." Ryu leaned closer to her. He smelled like expensive coffee and cold danger. "Describe him, every detail." "He was tall, white guy. Shaved head," Nkiru said, her mind flashing back to the terrifying face staring down at her. "He had a thick silver chain around his neck, and his teeth. He smiled at me right before he ran out. He had a gold front tooth, but it had a shape cut into it, a little diamond cross." Ryu's eyes narrowed. "And his face," Nkiru said, talking faster now. "He had a teardrop tattoo under his right eye, but it was messed up, like somebody tried to slice it off with a knife. He had an ugly, thick scar running right through the middle of the tattoo and up across his cheek." The kitchen went dead silent. Only the sound of the wind outside filled the massive room. Ryu slowly stood up straight. His dark eyes locked onto hers, burning with a scary, focused intensity. He knew exactly who she was talking about. Nkiru could see it in his face. "Scarred teardrop," Ryu whispered softly. A dark, evil smile slowly spread across his face. It was the scariest thing Nkiru had ever seen. "Mickey the Blade. He works for the Kingsmen." "You know him?" Nkiru asked, her voice shaking. Ryu walked around the kitchen island. He grabbed his heavy black coat from the back of a chair and threw it on. "I know him. He is a dog that likes to bite, which means he will not wait around. He will come looking for the girl who saw him." "Wait, where are you going?" Nkiru stood up quickly, panic rushing into her chest. She grabbed his arm. "You can't leave me here alone. You said your men were outside, but what if they get past them?" Ryu looked down at her small brown hand gripping his thick arm. He didn't pull away. He looked back up at her face. "I am not leaving you here alone. You are coming with me. We are going to a place where Mickey and his crew do their business. We are going to let them see you." Nkiru backed away, shaking her head wildly. "No, hell no. I'm not walking into a gang hideout so you can use me as a human shield." "You will do what I tell you," Ryu said, grabbing her by the back of the neck. His grip was firm, guiding her toward the elevator. "You want to survive this city, little bird? You do not hide from the wolves. You stand in the clearing and you wait for them to show their teeth." Nkiru fought him the whole way to the elevator. She dug the heels of her damp socks into the polished wood floor, trying to stop him from dragging her. It was completely useless. Ryu Seong-min was like a walking mountain. His large hand was clamped around the back of her neck, not tight enough to choke her, but firm enough to control her every move. His fingers were hot against her skin. "Let me go, damn it," she screamed, twisting her shoulders. "You're going to get me killed. They'll shoot us both the second we walk in there." Ryu pushed a silver button on the wall and the heavy elevator doors slid open. He shoved her inside. Nkiru stumbled forward, hitting the back wall of the metal box. She spun around, her chest heaving, ready to swing her fists. Ryu stepped inside casually and pressed the button for the garage. The doors closed, trapping them in the small space. He looked at her with totally dead eyes. "If they shoot, you duck," he said, his thick Korean accent making the words sound even harsher. "But they will not shoot. Street gangs are stupid, but they are not brave. They do not want a war with a ghost." "A ghost?" Nkiru yelled, her voice echoing in the small elevator. "You're a crazy old man who thinks he's in an action movie. I saw Mickey shoot your brother point blank in the head. He didn't care who was watching. He's a monster." "Mickey is a street rat," Ryu corrected her, crossing his thick arms over his massive chest. "He pulled a trigger because somebody paid him. He does not know how to fight a real war. I will teach him." The elevator stopped with a soft ding. The doors opened to the freezing, concrete underground garage. Ryu grabbed her upper arm and pulled her out. Nkiru looked around desperately. There was a ramp leading up to the street, but a heavy metal gate blocked it. There was no way out. Ryu walked her over to the same black SUV from last night. He opened the passenger door. Nkiru planted her feet on the cold concrete. "Please," she begged, her voice finally breaking. The anger was fading, leaving only pure, cold terror. "Please, Ryu, don't do this to me, just leave me here. Lock me in a closet. Put me in the basement like you said. I won't move, just don't make me go out there." Ryu paused. He looked down at her. For a split second, Nkiru thought she saw a tiny flash of pity in his dark eyes, but it was gone just as fast as it appeared. "Get in the car, Nkiru," he said softly. "No," she shook her head, hot tears blurring her vision. "I won't be your human shield. I won't do it." Ryu sighed. He stepped closer, his massive body trapping her against the side of the car. He reached across her, his chest brushing against her shoulder, and grabbed the seatbelt. With one smooth, powerful motion, he lifted her by the waist and tossed her onto the passenger seat like she weighed nothing. Before she could scramble out, he slammed the door shut. Nkiru heard the locks click down. She hit the thick, tinted window with her fist, sobbing. "Fuck you, let me out." Ryu didn't look at her. He walked to the back of the SUV and popped the trunk. Nkiru twisted around in her seat, watching him through the back window. He opened a long black case. Inside were weapons, lots of them. He pulled out 2 extra magazines for his pistol and slid them into the deep pockets of his black wool coat. He grabbed a heavy combat knife and strapped it to his ankle under his dark jeans. He was going to war, and he was dragging her right into the middle of the crossfire. Ryu slammed the trunk shut and got into the driver's seat. A blast of cold air entered the car with him. He started the engine, shifting the heavy car into gear. "Buckle your seatbelt," he said. "Go to hell," Nkiru spat, wiping her nose with the back of her sweater's sleeve. Ryu reached over, grabbed the belt, and pulled it across her chest, clicking it into place. His hand brushed against her side, sending a weird, hot shiver through her body. She hated how close he was. She hated how he smelled like winter wind and expensive smoke. The heavy metal gate rolled open, and Ryu drove the SUV out into the freezing Chicago morning. The snow was falling hard now, blowing across the gray streets in thick white sheets. The sky was the color of dirty concrete. The wipers clicked back and forth, fighting against the heavy snow. The heater blasted hot air, but Nkiru still felt like she was freezing from the inside out. "Why can't you just go alone?" she asked, her voice quiet now. The fight was drained out of her. "You know his name, you know he's a Kingsman. Just go find him and kill him. Why do you need me?" Ryu kept his eyes on the snowy road. Mickey is a coward. When a rat knows a cat is hunting him, he hides deep in the walls. The Kingsmen have 100 different trap houses and dirty bars on the south side. If I go alone, they will just tell me they have not seen him. They will lie, and he will slip away. "So what difference does it make if I'm there?" she asked, hugging her knees to her chest. "Because you are the prize," Ryu said bluntly. "Mickey knows he left a witness. He knows his boss will kill him if you talk to the cops. He is probably tearing the city apart trying to find you right now. If I walk in there alone, I am just an old man looking for a fight, but if I walk in there with you..." "They'll see the target," Nkiru finished his sentence. Her stomach twisted into sick knots. "They'll tell him exactly where I am." "Yes," Ryu said, "and he will come to me. He will bring his crew. And I will kill every single one of them until he tells me who gave the order to murder my brother." Nkiru rested her head against the cold glass of the window. She was trapped in a nightmare. She was just a regular nurse. She spent her days changing bandages and checking blood pressure. Now she was sitting in a bulletproof car with a crazy old Korean hitman driving straight into gang territory. They drove for another 40 minutes, crossing deep into the south side. The nice, clean streets turned into broken roads filled with potholes and dirty, gray snow. The buildings looked tired and beaten down, bars on the windows, graffiti on the brick walls. Ryu slowed the SUV down, pulling to a stop on a side street next to a brick building that looked half abandoned. The only sign of life was a buzzing, broken neon sign in the window that said liquor. "We are here," Ryu said. He put the car in park and turned off the engine. Nkiru looked at the dirty building. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. "I can't do this. Ryu, please, I'm going to throw up." Ryu reached across the center console. He didn't grab her roughly this time. Instead, his thick fingers wrapped gently around her shaking hand. His skin was rough with calluses, but his grip was steady and warm. Nkiru looked at him, completely surprised by the gentle touch. "Look at me," he ordered softly. Nkiru turned her head, looking into his dark, ancient eyes. "You are not going to die today," Ryu said. His voice was completely calm, completely certain. "When we walk through that door, you stay exactly 1 step behind me. If I move left, you move left. If I stop, you stop. You do not look anyone in the eye, you do not speak. Let them see your face and let me do the rest." "What if they have guns?" she whispered. "They will have guns," Ryu said simply, "but they will not pull them fast enough. Do you understand?" Nkiru swallowed hard. She didn't have a choice. She nodded slowly. "Yes." Ryu let go of her hand. He opened his door and stepped out into the freezing snow. Nkiru took a deep, shaky breath, pushed her door open, and followed him. The wind hit her instantly, blowing her messy black hair into her eyes. The snow crunched loudly under her boots. Ryu walked to the front of the SUV, waiting for her. When she stepped up next to him, he reached out and grabbed the thick collar of her wool sweater, bunching the fabric in his large fist. He didn't hurt her, but he locked her to his side. "Keep your head down," he muttered. He kicked the heavy metal door of the bar open with his boot. The loud bang cut through the freezing air. Nkiru stepped inside with him, the heat and smell of the place hitting her like a dirty blanket. It smelled like stale beer, old cigarette smoke, and cheap weed. The lighting was dark and orange. There was a pool table in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 big guys wearing baggy clothes and heavy chains. A bartender was wiping the sticky counter with a dirty rag. Heavy rap music pounded from the speakers in the corners. When the door slammed shut behind them, the entire bar went dead silent. The bartender reached under the counter and turned the music off. The sudden silence was terrifying. Every single guy around the pool table turned to look at them. Their eyes narrowed. They dropped their pool cues. Hands slowly drifted toward their waistbands. Nkiru squeezed her eyes shut for a second. This was it. She was going to die on a sticky bar floor. Ryu didn't stop moving. He walked right to the center of the room, dragging Nkiru along with him. He stopped 10 feet away from the pool table. He let go of her collar and rested his heavy hand on the back of her neck, pushing her slightly forward into the dim orange light. "Look closely," Ryu said. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed off the dirty walls. It carried an intense, terrifying authority. "Make sure you see her face." A tall guy with a neck tattoo and a gold grill stepped forward. He looked at Nkiru, his eyes dragging up and down her body like she was a piece of meat. Then he looked at Ryu and let out a harsh laugh. "You lost, old man?" the guy asked, pulling his jacket back to show the black handle of a gun tucked into his jeans. "This ain't a nursing home, and you definitely ain't supposed to be bringing a sweet little chocolate drop in here." Nkiru shrank back, pressing her shoulders against Ryu's solid chest. She could feel the steady, calm beating of his heart against her back. "I am looking for Mickey the Blade," Ryu said smoothly. The tall guy stopped laughing. The other guys in the room shifted nervously. "Nobody by that name around here," the tall guy lied, spitting on the floor. "Now, why don't you leave the girl and take your wrinkly ass back out into the snow before we put a hole in you?" The guy took 2 steps forward, reaching out his hand to grab Nkiru's arm. He never even touched her. Ryu moved faster than Nkiru could even process. He didn't pull a gun. He just stepped forward, grabbed the tall guy's outstretched wrist with both hands, and twisted his whole body. A loud, sickening crack filled the bar. The tall guy let out a high-pitched, screaming wail as his arm bent entirely backward. The bone ripped right through the skin near his elbow, spraying dark blood onto the dirty floor. "Shit," one of the other guys yelled, pulling a gun from his waistband. Before the guy could even raise the barrel, Ryu kicked the screaming man directly in the chest, sending his heavy body flying backward into the pool table. At the exact same time, Ryu reached into his coat. Bang, the sound was deafening. Nkiru screamed and covered her ears. Ryu had shot the gun right out of the second guy's hand. The man dropped to his knees, screaming and holding his bloody, shattered fingers. The gun slid across the floor, stopping near Nkiru's boot. The other 3 guys froze completely. Their hands were on their guns, but they were too terrified to pull them out. Ryu stood in the center of the room, holding his heavy pistol sideways, perfectly steady. The barrel was smoking. He looked completely relaxed, like he was just taking a walk in the park. "Nobody moves," Ryu ordered, his voice dead cold. Nobody moved a muscle. The only sound was the tall guy groaning in pain on top of the pool table. Ryu shifted his aim, pointing his gun directly at the bartender's chest. The bartender threw his hands up in the air, his eyes wide with pure panic. "Listen to me carefully," Ryu said to the bartender. "You are going to call Mickey the Blade. You are going to tell him that Ryu Seong-min was here. Tell him I have the girl who saw his ugly face at the diner last night." Nkiru stood completely still, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was terrified of the men in the bar, but right now, she was even more terrified of the man standing in front of her. He was a machine, a violent, unstoppable machine. "Tell Mickey I am keeping her," Ryu continued, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "If he wants to shut her mouth, he has to come through me. Tell him he knows where my house is. I will be waiting." Ryu didn't wait for the bartender to answer. He reached back without looking, grabbed Nkiru by the front of her coat, and pulled her toward the heavy metal door. He kept his gun aimed at the center of the room, making sure nobody tried to be a hero. He kicked the door open backward, dragging Nkiru out into the freezing snow. The cold air hit Nkiru's face like a bucket of ice water. Her legs finally gave out. She stumbled forward, gasping for air, her knees hitting the snow-covered sidewalk. Ryu didn't stop. He grabbed her under the arms, hoisted her to her feet, and threw her into the passenger seat of the SUV. He slammed the door, ran around the front of the car, and jumped into the driver's seat. He threw the car in reverse, tires spinning on the ice, and peeled away from the curb before anyone inside the bar could even think about following them. Nkiru sat in the passenger seat, her whole body shaking violently. She couldn't catch her breath. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The image of the bone breaking through the skin, the deafening gunshot, the smell of blood, it was all too much. "Stop crying," Ryu said harshly. He drove fast, weaving through the snowy streets to put distance between them and the bar. "You broke his arm," she sobbed, her voice high and panicked. "You shot that guy's hand off. You're a fucking psychopath." Ryu hit the brakes hard at a red light. He turned to her, his dark eyes blazing with anger. He reached across the console and grabbed her jaw, his thick fingers squeezing her cheeks just hard enough to make her look at him. "I am a psychopath?" he growled, leaning his face close to hers. "Those men would have dragged you into the back room and passed you around until you stopped breathing. They are animals. The only way to deal with animals is to be the biggest, meanest predator in the room. I showed them blood because blood is the only language they understand. Do not sit there and cry because I did what was necessary to keep us alive." Nkiru stared into his eyes, her chest heaving. The tears stopped falling. The pure, terrifying intensity of his face froze the panic right out of her. He was right. She hated it, but he was right. If he had asked nicely, she would be dead. Ryu let go of her jaw and turned back to the steering wheel. He pressed the gas, driving them back toward the safety of his fortress. "The bait is set," Ryu said quietly, his voice returning to that cold, dead tone. "Now we go home, and we wait for the wolves to come to our door." The ride back to the house was dead quiet. The heavy SUV crushed the fresh snow under its thick tires. Nkiru stared out the passenger window. Her reflection in the dark glass looked like a ghost. She was pale, and her eyes were wide and red from crying. The heater blew hot air on her face, but she could not stop shivering. Her brain kept playing the sound of that man's arm snapping, over and over again. Ryu drove with one hand on the steering wheel. The other hand rested on his thick leg, right next to his gun. He did not look at her. He just watched the dark, snowy roads with cold, empty eyes. They reached the wealthy neighborhood by the lake. The giant iron gates of Ryu's fortress swung open, but things looked very different now. There were 3 more black SUVs parked in the wide, snowy driveway. Big men in thick winter coats stood around the cars. They held long, black rifles. They looked like a private army getting ready for a war. Ryu drove down into the underground garage and put the SUV in park. "Get out," he said. Nkiru opened her door. Her legs felt like jelly. She almost fell onto the freezing concrete, but Ryu reached out and caught her by the elbow. His grip was tight and strong. He pulled her up and walked her to the elevator. When the metal doors opened to the massive living room, it was no longer empty. 5 dangerous-looking Korean men were spread out across the house. One was looking at a laptop screen showing security camera feeds from outside. Another was checking the heavy locks on the giant glass windows. They all stopped and bowed their heads slightly when Ryu walked into the room. Ryu said something fast and sharp in Korean. The men nodded and went right back to work. He looked down at Nkiru. "You smell like cheap beer, stale smoke, and fear," he said flatly. "Go upstairs, take a hot shower, wash the dirt off." "I don't have any clothes," Nkiru whispered. Her voice was totally gone. She just felt empty and numb inside. "I will put something on the bed for you. Go." She did not have the energy to fight him anymore. She walked up the wooden stairs, her damp socks making soft, slapping sounds. She went into the master bedroom and locked the heavy wooden door behind her. She walked straight into the huge, black marble bathroom. Nkiru stripped off her dirty, freezing clothes. She left them in a wet, nasty pile on the floor. She turned on the shower, letting the steaming hot water run over her freezing skin. It burned at first. She stood under the spray and pressed her hands against the dark tile wall. Finally, she let herself cry. She sobbed hard, the hot water washing her tears down the drain. She was a normal person. She paid her rent on time. She worked double shifts at the hospital cleaning bedpans and checking blood pressure. Now she was trapped in a fortress with a small army of hitmen, waiting for a gang of killers to come and shoot up the place. She scrubbed her skin until it was bright red. She used Ryu's expensive body wash. It smelled like cedar wood and dark spices. It smelled exactly like him. She hated it, but she had no choice. When she turned off the water and stepped out, she wrapped a thick white towel around her body. She opened the bathroom door slowly, peeking her head out. The bedroom was empty. Sitting on the edge of the massive king-sized bed was a pair of dark gray sweatpants and a long-sleeve black t-shirt. Nkiru dropped the towel and put the clothes on. They were huge. The sweatpants fell past her feet, so she had to roll the waist up 3 times and tie the string as tight as it could go. The sleeves of the black shirt hung down past her fingertips. She pushed them up to her elbows. She looked ridiculous, like a little kid playing dress-up in her dad's closet. But the clothes were incredibly soft and warm against her clean skin. She walked back downstairs. The living room was tense. The armed men were mostly out of sight now, guarding the heavy doors and watching the cameras in the dark corners. Ryu was sitting at the dark granite kitchen island. He had a black rifle spread out in pieces on a white towel. He was cleaning the metal parts with a small rag that smelled like gun oil. He heard her footsteps and looked up. His dark eyes slowly moved over her. Seeing her swimming in his oversized clothes did not make him smile. Nothing made him smile. But his wide shoulders dropped just a tiny bit, like he was glad she was not crying anymore. "Sit," he pointed to the tall metal stool next to him. Nkiru walked over and sat down. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around her legs. She watched his thick, scarred hands put the rifle back together. He moved fast and smooth, like he had done it a million times before. "They are coming, aren't they?" Nkiru asked quietly. Ryu grabbed a metal clip filled with shiny brass bullets and slapped it into the bottom of the rifle. It made a loud, sharp click. "Yes, Mickey is a proud rat. I broke his man's arm and embarrassed him in front of his crew. He has to come for us. If he does not, his boss will think he is weak and kill him anyway." "And what happens if they bring 50 guys?" Nkiru asked. Her heart started beating faster again, banging against her ribs. What if they surround the house and burn it down? Ryu reached for a square glass bottle of dark whiskey sitting on the counter. He poured a small amount into a thick glass cup and slid it across the smooth granite toward her. "Drink it," he ordered. "It will stop your hands from shaking." Nkiru looked at the brown liquid. She hated whiskey, but she picked up the glass and took a small sip. The alcohol burned her throat and lit a hot fire in her empty stomach. She coughed, slamming the glass back down on the counter. "They will not bring 50 men," Ryu said calmly. He didn't pour a drink for himself. He needed his mind to be sharp. "This is a very rich neighborhood. Rich people call the police immediately if they hear loud cars or see too many strange men walking around. Mickey will bring a small, quiet crew. They will try to sneak in through the back. They will try to be ghosts." "But you have an army here," she said, looking toward the hallway where one of his men was standing with a heavy shotgun. "I have 5 men," Ryu corrected her. "Men I trust with my own life. Men who served with me a long time ago. We do not need an army, we just need to wait." Nkiru wiped her mouth with the back of her oversized sleeve. "You're doing all this for your brother. You really loved him." Ryu stopped wiping down his rifle. The oily rag went perfectly still in his hands. He stared at the dark metal of the gun for a long time. The kitchen was dead quiet. The wind howled against the giant glass windows, throwing hard ice against the panes. "He was stupid," Ryu finally said. His voice was thick and heavy, like he was carrying a boulder inside his chest. "He wanted to play games with bad people. He owed them a lot of money. I told him to let me pay his debt. I told him to walk away and come work for me, but he had too much pride. He thought he was a tough guy." Ryu set the rag down. He looked at Nkiru. His eyes were so dark, they looked like deep, empty holes. "He was my blood, the only family I had left in this miserable world. You do not let street dogs kill your blood and just walk away. You kill the dogs, and then you kill the man who holds their leashes." Nkiru stared at him. She saw the deep, ugly pain hiding under his scary, stone face. He was a monster, yes, but he was a monster who was hurting. She picked up the glass and took another sip of the whiskey. The burn did not feel as bad this time. I just want to go back to my life, Nkiru whispered, staring down at her bare feet. I have patients who need me. I have a fat cat who is probably starving in my apartment right now. I just want this to be over. Ryu leaned across the island. His massive chest almost touched the granite counter. He was so close she could feel the heat coming off him. It will be over tonight. Mickey will come, he will die. And then I will find out who gave the order to shoot up that diner. Once the boss is dead, the contract on your head will be gone. You can go back to your cat. You promise, she asked, looking up at him with desperate eyes. Ryu's face did not change. I do not make promises, I make facts. Now come with me, we are going back upstairs. Nkiru frowned, sliding off the stool. Why? It's only the middle of the afternoon. Because when the sun goes down, this house becomes a battlefield, Ryu said, picking up his heavy rifle and resting it against his side. I want you in the safest room, away from the glass windows downstairs. You will stay in my bedroom, and I will be right there with you. He walked around the island and grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to hurt her, but firm enough to tell her she had no choice. He led her back up the wooden stairs. The house felt like a giant, dark tomb now. Every shadow in the corner looked like a man hiding with a gun. Every sound of the wind sounded like boots crushing the snow outside. They went into the master bedroom. Ryu walked over to the giant glass windows overlooking the lake and pushed a small silver button on the wall. Heavy metal shutters slowly rolled down from the ceiling outside, covering the glass completely. The loud clanking sound of the metal locking into place made Nkiru jump. The room went pitch black for a second before Ryu turned on a small, dim lamp on his nightstand. The thick metal shutters blocked out the beautiful view of the lake, but they also blocked out any sniper bullets. The bedroom felt like a concrete bunker now. Get in the bed, Ryu ordered. He walked over to the leather chair in the corner and sat down heavily. He rested his black rifle across his knees and stared at the door. Nkiru looked at the giant gray bed. Then she looked at the scary older man sitting in the dark corner of the room. I'm not tired, she said stubbornly, crossing her arms. I did not ask if you were tired, Ryu growled, his voice vibrating in the quiet room. I told you to get in the bed. If bullets start flying through the drywall in the hallway, the thick mattress will protect you. Sit in the middle. Do not stand up. Do not walk around. Nkiru wanted to yell at him. She wanted to tell him he was a bossy, arrogant jerk, but she was too scared of what was coming tonight. She climbed onto the huge bed and crawled right into the middle. She pulled the thick gray blanket all the way up to her chin, burying herself in his sheets. She watched him sitting in the chair. He looked like a stone statue. He did not blink. He just stared at the heavy wooden bedroom door, waiting for it to open. Hours dragged by like heavy stones. The digital clock on the nightstand clicked to 8 o'clock, then 9. The bedroom was completely dark except for the small, weak lamp in the corner. Nkiru lay in the middle of the massive gray bed, her legs cramped from staying perfectly still. She watched Ryu. He had not moved an inch. He sat in the leather chair, his big hands resting on the black rifle across his knees. His broad chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. How can you just sit there? Nkiru whispered. The silence was driving her crazy. She felt like a trapped rat waiting for a snake to slide under the door. Ryu did not turn his head. Patience keeps you alive. Panic gets you killed. Go to sleep. I can't sleep. Men with guns are coming to kill us, she yelled softly, throwing her hands up in the air. They are coming to kill me, Ryu corrected her softly, his eyes still locked on the heavy wooden bedroom door. They are coming to take you back to their boss. If they get inside, they will not shoot you. They need you alive to prove they did their job. That did not make Nkiru feel any better. She pulled the gray blanket tighter around her shoulders. She wanted to cry again, but her eyes were too dry and tired. She just watched the clock change to 10. Then 11. The wind outside blew harder, rattling the heavy metal shutters covering the glass windows. The clock hit 11:30. Then, a sharp, quick beep sounded from the small radio clipped to Ryu's belt. Ryu stood up instantly. He did not make a sound. The heavy leather chair did not even squeak under his weight. He tapped a button on his radio and held it close to his ear. He listened for 2 seconds. His jaw tightened. They cut the power to the front gate, Ryu said to her. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. They are on the property. Nkiru's heart slammed against her ribs. She threw the heavy gray blanket off and sat up fast. What do we do? What do I do? Ryu walked over to the bed. He reached behind his back and pulled out a thick, heavy black pistol from his waistband. He slapped it down on the mattress right next to her leg. You stay exactly where you are, he ordered. He pointed a thick, scarred finger right at her face. If you hear footsteps in the hall, you get under the bed. If the door opens and it is not me, you point that gun at the door and you pull the trigger until it stops clicking. Do you understand? Nkiru stared at the gun. Her hands shook wildly. I don't know how to shoot. I'm a nurse. I fix people, I don't shoot them. Point and pull, Ryu said coldly. It is not hard. Save your own life, Nkiru. He turned around and walked out of the bedroom, carrying his heavy black rifle. He shut the heavy wooden door behind him. The lock clicked loudly. Nkiru was totally alone. She grabbed the heavy gun with both hands. The metal was freezing cold against her sweaty palms. She scrambled off the mattress and slid under the giant bed. The floor was hard and cold. She pressed her back against the wall, holding the gun pointed right at the bedroom door. The dust under the bed tickled her nose, but she held her breath. Downstairs, all hell broke loose. It did not start with shouting. It started with a loud, terrible crash of glass breaking. Then, the heavy, deafening roar of a shotgun shook the floorboards right above Nkiru's head. Boom, boom. Nkiru squeezed her eyes shut and let out a small, terrified cry. The sound of rapid gunfire followed. Pop, 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 pop. It sounded like a war movie playing right below her feet. Men were screaming. Heavy boots stomped across the hardwood floors downstairs. Something huge smashed into a wall, shaking the whole house. She heard Ryu's deep voice barking a command in Korean. Then more gunfire. Louder this time. The smell of burning gunpowder drifted under the bedroom door, stinging Nkiru's nose. Tears ran down her face. She hugged her knees, keeping the gun aimed at the door. She prayed to God that Ryu was as tough as he looked. She hated the arrogant old man, but right now, he was the only thing standing between her and the monsters who murdered his brother. The shooting downstairs stopped for a few seconds. Then, a man screamed in pure agony. It was a wet, horrible sound. Nkiru clamped her hands over her ears. She did not want to hear people dying. She just wanted to wake up in her own cheap apartment with her fat cat. Heavy footsteps started running up the wooden stairs. Nkiru froze. She pulled her hands away from her ears and gripped the heavy pistol tighter. The footsteps were fast and sloppy. Ryu did not walk like that. Ryu moved like a heavy ghost. This was someone else. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. Nkiru stopped breathing. Her chest burned. The brass doorknob slowly turned. It rattled hard. The door was locked. Kick it, a rough voice yelled from the hallway. Smash. A heavy boot kicked the wooden door right near the lock. The wood splintered with a loud crack. Nkiru dragged herself backward, hitting the wall. She raised the gun, her hands shaking so hard the barrel bounced up and down. Smash. The door flew open, slamming against the inside wall. The dim lamp light from the nightstand spilled out into the dark hallway. A man stepped into the bedroom. He was wearing a dark, puffy jacket and a black ski mask pulled over his face. He held a short, silver gun in his hand. Check the bathroom, he yelled over his shoulder to someone else in the hall. He took 2 steps into the room. He looked at the empty bed, then he looked down. His eyes locked onto Nkiru hiding under the bed frame. Found the bitch, he yelled. He raised his gun, pointing it right at her face. Nkiru did not think. Her survival instinct took over completely. She squeezed her eyes shut, pointed the heavy black pistol at his legs, and pulled the trigger. Bangs, bangs, bang. The gun kicked back hard, hurting her wrists. The noise was incredibly loud in the small room. The man screamed. He dropped his silver gun and fell to his knees, grabbing his stomach. He hit the floor hard, groaning and rolling in a pool of dark blood. Nkiru opened her eyes, gasping for air. She had shot him. She actually shot a man. Before she could even process it, a second man ran into the room. This one did not wear a mask. He had a shaved head and a long, ugly scar running through a teardrop tattoo under his right eye. Mickey the Blade. He looked at the man bleeding on the floor. Then he dropped to his knees and looked under the bed. He smiled. His gold front tooth shined in the weak lamplight. It had a small diamond cross cut into it. "Well, well, well," Mickey laughed. His voice was nasty and thin. "Look at the little mouse hiding in the dark. Drop the gun, sweetie, you're out of bullets." Nkiru pulled the trigger again. Click, click, he was right. The heavy gun was totally empty. She threw the useless metal gun at his face. Mickey easily knocked it away with his hand. He reached under the bed and grabbed her by the ankle. His grip was like a steel trap. "No, get off me," Nkiru screamed, kicking wildly with her other foot. She kicked him in the shoulder, but he did not let go. He dragged her out from under the bed, pulling her roughly across the hardwood floor. Nkiru clawed at the ground, trying to grab the rug, the bedpost, anything. She kicked and scratched like a wild animal. Mickey stood up and yanked her to her feet by her messy black hair. Nkiru screamed in pain. Tears blurred her vision. He wrapped his arm around her neck, pressing the cold, hard barrel of his gun against her temple. "You caused a lot of trouble, little girl," Mickey hissed in her ear. He smelled like cheap weed and old sweat. "My boss is very unhappy. He wants to have a nice, long talk with you. Now stop fighting before I put a bullet in your leg." Mickey dragged her out of the bedroom and into the hallway. The house was strangely quiet now. The gunfire downstairs had completely stopped. The only sound was the smoke alarms beeping loudly from the gunpowder filling the air. "Keep moving," Mickey ordered, pushing her toward the stairs. "We're going down nice and slow." Nkiru stumbled down the wooden steps, Mickey holding her tight by the neck. When they reached the bottom, Nkiru gasped. The beautiful, expensive living room was completely destroyed. The massive glass windows overlooking the lake were shattered into a million pieces. The cold winter wind blew into the house, mixing with thick gray smoke. The black leather couches were ripped and full of bullet holes. And there were bodies, so many bodies. 4 men in dark puffy jackets lay dead on the floor. Blood stained the expensive dark wood. 2 of Ryu's Korean men were also on the ground. One was dead. The other was sitting against the kitchen island, holding his bleeding side and breathing heavy. But Ryu was nowhere to be seen. Mickey laughed out loud. "Looks like the old man finally ran out of luck," he yelled to the empty room. "Come out, Ryu. I got your little witness. You want her to live, you step out where I can see you." The wind howled through the broken windows. Nobody answered. "He's dead," Mickey whispered in Nkiru's ear, laughing again. "The big bad Korean ghost got put in the dirt. Now it's just you and me." Mickey pushed her toward the broken glass doors leading out to the snowy yard. "Walk," he commanded. Nkiru felt completely broken. She had fought so hard, she had hidden, she had shot a man, but it was all for nothing. Ryu was dead. His men were dead. And she was going right back to the monster who ordered the diner hit. She took a slow step forward, her bare feet crunching on the broken glass. It cut her skin, but she was too numb to feel the pain. Suddenly, a massive shadow dropped from the ceiling above the kitchen island. Ryu Seong-min landed on the granite counter with a heavy, solid thud. He was covered in dark blood, but his dark eyes were burning with pure, violent rage. He didn't have his rifle anymore. He held a long, thick combat knife in his right hand. Mickey yelled and raised his gun toward Ryu. Before Mickey could even pull the trigger, Ryu threw the heavy knife like a lightning bolt. The thick blade spun through the smoky air and buried itself deep into Mickey's right shoulder. Mickey screamed, dropping his gun. He let go of Nkiru's neck and stumbled backward, grabbing the handle of the knife sticking out of his flesh. Nkiru fell to her knees, gasping for air. Ryu jumped off the kitchen island. He moved so fast it did not make sense for a man his age. He closed the distance between them in 2 huge steps. He grabbed Mickey by the throat with his bare hands and slammed him backward against the wall. The impact shook the whole house. "You are a dead rat," Ryu growled, his voice vibrating with pure hatred. Mickey choked, kicking his legs helplessly in the air. Wait, I can tell you who ordered the hit, I can tell you." Ryu's face was a mask of total evil. "I will ask you when I am done breaking your bones." Ryu pulled his fist back and punched Mickey directly in the face. The sickening crunch of bone echoed over the howling wind. Mickey went completely limp, his eyes rolling back in his head. Ryu let him drop to the floor like a piece of garbage. Ryu turned around. He looked at Nkiru sitting on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and dead bodies. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and his black shirt was torn. He looked like a demon walking out of hell. He walked over to her. He did not say a word. He just reached down, scooped her up in his massive arms, and held her tight against his chest.